explode on the scene with the guitars and Cadillacs.
It took 9 years before but I began to play the nightclubs in and around Southern California.
For decades, Dwight Yoakam kept us guessing, always sharp in denim, always a little elusive. At 68, the honky-tonk rebel finally let something slip. Not in a press release or an onstage rant, but in a way only he could. Quietly, unmistakably, and without apology. It wasn't just a look back. It was something deeper. A moment that confirmed long-held suspicions and peeled back the rhinestone curtain we've all stared at for years. And no, it's not just about guitars and Cadillacs. It's about the kind of truth that reshapes how we see the man, the myth, and maybe even country music itself. So what did Dwight finally say? That's where it gets interesting. The rebel roots of Dwight Yoakam. Long before he was recognized as a country music trailblazer, Dwight Yoakam was laying the groundwork for a different kind of career, one that didn't play by Nashville's rules. In the early 1980s, as mainstream country leaned heavily into pop influences and studio sheen, Yoakam was playing 5 sets a night in Southern California dive bars, far from the Music Row machinery. These were not venues friendly to twangy guitars and cowboy hats, but Yoakam's refusal to compromise on his sound or image began to draw attention. Instead of adapting to the industry's expectations, he sharpened his edge, doubling down on a style rooted in Bakersfield grit and rockabilly swagger, a throwback to country's more rugged past. Yoakam had already tested the waters in Nashville years earlier, in 1976, only to find that the industry was largely disinterested in live performers who didn't fit the mold. At the time, the business prioritized songwriters and tightly packaged studio acts, with little room for boundary-pushing traditionalists. Rather than wait around for acceptance, Yoakam returned to California with a clear sense of purpose: to build his own momentum without permission from the country establishment. His outsider status, far from being a hindrance, became part of his identity. By cultivating an audience through relentless performances and word of mouth, he made it impossible for the industry to ignore him. This defiance culminated in the release of Guitars, Cadillacs, etc., in 1986, a debut that not only introduced Yoakam to the world, but sent shockwaves through a genre that had grown comfortable. With such boldness, producer Pete Anderson worked on a raw production with uncompromising soul as the sonic nightmare of Yoakam's years in the trenches. It was not just a nod to the past, it was a full-blown restoration of country music's emotional center, with all the courage that came with that task. Writers took notice. Fans were drawn in like moths to the flame of truth in his lyrics. He was not merely reviving honky-tonk, he began to reformulate its standing in the modern day on his own terms. By now, almost 40 years later, it seems Yoakam's defiance of Nashville norms has become one of country music's boldest career choices. His 2024 release, Brighter Days, shows, according to the LA Times, his commitment to authenticity is remarkably undiminished. Grounded in a Bakersfield-inspired aesthetic and lyrical themes of personal growth and artistic clarity, Yoakam stands as living proof that tradition and innovation can exist side by side. His legacy is not only one of defying conformity, it is also one of proving that the road less traveled often bears the deepest tracks. By forging his own lane outside the country establishment, Yoakam didn't merely survive, he reshaped the very culture that once locked him out. Little did Nashville know, Yoakam was about to change the rules they thought he'd never play by. A career that rewrote the rules. When Dwight Yoakam released Guitars, Cadillacs, etc., in 1986, it wasn't just a breakthrough. It was a bold reset for country music. At a time when the genre was leaning toward polished pop country crossovers, Yoakam's debut was fiercely unrefined, filled with honky-tonk heartbreak, brash guitar licks, and unapologetic swagger. The album's unmistakable Bakersfield twang, honed through years of gritty live performances in Los Angeles clubs, was the product of both rebellion and reverence. Yoakam and producer Pete Anderson didn't just channel classic country. They re-energized it, presenting it with a punk-like edge that felt both timeless and urgent. The album didn't just succeed commercially. It turned Yoakam into a national phenomenon. With double platinum sales and a string of chart-climbing singles like his cover of Honky Tonk Man and the swaggering title track Guitars, Cadillacs, Yoakam proved that authenticity could resonate far beyond traditional country strongholds. What made the success so striking wasn't just the sound, it was how far it came from the industry machine. Without the backing of Nashville's major labels in the early stages, Yoakam's grassroots rise through the LA club circuit gave his music a lived-in credibility. Fans responded to the emotional grit and straightforward storytelling, while critics saw him as a much-needed jolt to a genre that had lost its teeth. What Guitars, Cadillacs offered was more than an album. Instead, it was a philosophical challenge to the notion that country music had better change to survive. Instead of blending into the synth-laden ballads of the day, he took the raw emotion, the cries of pedal steel, and the lyrical loneliness that had characterized greats before him and threw himself further into it. With this, he taught the industry, the new generation of listeners, that evolution needn't entail dilution. Moreover, the success of the record set the groundwork for neo-traditionalism in the late 80s and early 90s, paving the way for other artists unwilling to trade storytelling for chart positions. The legacy of Guitars, Cadillacs still reverberates through country music today, with the mentions in Billboard and LA Times at this time. In fact, the 2024 album of Yoakam, entitled Brighter Days, will be using and drawing from that emotional well first tapped in that debut. Updated sonically, yet the new material carries alongside it the same honesty and fire that made his early work so powerful. Yoakam was never looking to play by the rules of others. And with Guitars, Cadillacs, he didn't just achieve success the way he wanted. He proved that the country did not need a makeover. It just needed a reminder of what made it great in the first place. The fallout. With Pete Anderson, for nearly 2 decades, the musical partnership between Dwight Yoakam and guitarist-producer Pete Anderson was one of the most productive and defining collaborations in modern country music. Together, they helped usher in a gritty revival of the Bakersfield sound that stood apart from Nashville's increasingly polished output in the 1980s and 90s. Anderson's sharp, twang-soaked guitar work and keen production instincts were essential to Yoakam's early success, shaping albums like Guitars, Cadillacs, etc., Hillbilly Deluxe, and this time into genre classics. Their creative synergy gave Yoakam's music a unique intensity, one foot in the past, the other stepping defiantly into something new. That partnership came to a sudden and public end in 2004, when Anderson filed a lawsuit against Yoakam, citing breach of an oral agreement related to canceled tour dates. Anderson claimed financial losses of over $44,000, including unreimbursed expenses for band rehearsals and arrangements, following Yoakam's decision to pursue acting projects. The lawsuit exposed long-simmering tensions between the two, rooted in more than just finances. Over the years, the informal nature of their working relationship, largely built on trust rather than written contracts, left both parties vulnerable when priorities began to shift. The legal action effectively ended one of country music's most respected creative alliances, casting a shadow over what had been an era of remarkable innovation. While the end of the relationship marked an important closing of a door for Yoakam, it also heralded the opening of another. With Anderson out of the producer's chair, Yoakam assumed full creative control over all aspects of his music from the 2005 album Blame the Vein onward. That recording not only announced a sonic departure, with Yoakam trying out new settings and arrangements, but it also insinuated his intent to grow as an independent producer. Dividing utterances within the co-limelight produced a context where Yoakam began drawing upon more varied stylistic influences, entering an amalgam of rock, soul, and psychedelia into his music, all the while keeping his hallmark lyrics and signature drawl. The sound may have changed, but the very soul remained. The two would grab some sort of reconciliation after the split, but both acknowledge what they meant to each other. Yoakam has given many interviews in which he pretty much refers to Anderson as his muse, while Anderson believes his contributions to the records were incredibly fulfilling periods in his life. But their collaborations remain frozen in time, never again to be revisited and united. The music they did, however, still lives on, influencing new generations of artists who present their albums as roadmarks for mixing tradition with originality. The closing of their era did not stop Yoakam from advancing. It rather forced him to grow, making the point that an artist finds his own way to go ahead even when a great partnership comes to its end. Birth of a new Dwight. In 2012, Dwight Yoakam's creative path took an unexpected and invigorating turn with the release of 3 Pairs, a critically acclaimed album that marked his boldest evolution since the start of his career. At the heart of this transformation was his collaboration with alternative music icon Beck. Known for his genre-defying approach and experimental ethos, Beck brought a fresh lens to Yoakam's honky-tonk foundation, encouraging a more spontaneous and emotionally transparent sound. For an artist so closely associated with meticulous craftsmanship and traditional forms, this partnership opened up new creative territory without diluting the integrity that had always defined Yoakam's music. One of the most revealing moments of their work together came during the recording of A Heart Like Mine. Beck urged Yoakam to keep a raw, unpolished take, complete with Yoakam himself playing electric guitar, something he rarely did in a studio setting. That decision went against Yoakam's usual perfectionist instincts, but it unlocked a vulnerability in the performance that felt startlingly real. It was a shift away from calculated production and toward instinct-driven expression. That moment became a metaphor for the album as a whole, a project that embraced risk, welcomed imperfection, and focused on emotional immediacy over technical polish. Songs such as Rock It All Away and Take Hold of My Hand built upon this new creative path. While Yoakam's Bakersfield heritage was still intact, it was now infused with sonic detail and rhythmic modulations that owed a debt to Beck. The outcome wasn't a genre transplant, it was a reinterpretation. Yoakam didn't leave his bass behind. He retooled it with a more expansive palette. This openness to change not only revitalized his fan base, but also attracted listeners from the indie and alternative scenes, most of whom had never listened seriously to straight country music before. Rolling Stone would later name 3 Pairs one of the best country albums of the year, praising its bravery and forward thinking. An experiment in music, certainly. 3 Pairs represented a philosophical realignment for Yoakam's career. Released from the need to adhere to genre conventions, he returned to the raw impulses that had fueled him in the beginning of his career: emotional honesty and unflinching storytelling. Speaking with reporters, Yoakam spoke of how the project reawakened his creative curiosity, reminding him of the thrill and delight of getting out of his comfort zone. Instead of reinventing himself to become relevant, he became more profound in his self-knowledge through experimentation. 3. Pears was not a departure from Dwight Yoakam being himself. It was getting further into who he had always been, but with a more expansive and experimental perspective. South of heaven, west of hell. In 2000, Dwight Yoakam stepped behind the camera with the kind of creative audacity that had always defined his music career. South of Heaven, West of Hell, his feature film debut as writer, director, star, and composer, was a deeply personal Western set in the Arizona Territory of 1907. Yoakam played U.S. Marshal Valentine Casey, a haunted lawman forced to confront his criminal adoptive father during a Christmas Eve showdown. With a star-studded cast that included Billy Bob Thornton, Vince Vaughn, Bridget Fonda, and Peter Fonda, the film had all the markings of an ambitious passion project. Yet, despite its pedigree and intent, the movie was quickly labeled a critical and commercial misfire, raising questions about whether it was a bold leap or a creative overreach. The film's behind-the-scenes drama proved just as intense as its on-screen story. Mere days before production began, the primary investor pulled out, forcing Yoakam to bankroll the project himself. He famously sold his Malibu home and poured his own money into keeping the production afloat. Eventually, his production company, a cast of strays, filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, and several crew members sued over unpaid wages. The financial burden was crushing, and the movie's final box office return, just over $28,000 against a budget estimated at $4 million, turned the venture into a cautionary tale. Rather than a triumphant crossover into Hollywood, South of Heaven, West of Hell became an emblem of artistic risk met with brutal consequences. The critics were not kind. With a low Rotten Tomatoes rating, the film was faulted for its tone that was inconsistent tone, rambling nature, and directionless narrative. Variety stated that it lacks the critical ingredients of shape, consistent tone, rhythm, and economy. Yet some reviewers were willing to grant that Yoakam's effort was genuine, and his push to extend the Western genre towards something more psychological and personal. There was an undeniable artistic aspiration at play, even though the execution did not quite live up. Despite its flaws, the film possessed a clear voice, an artist's voice, something uncommon in actor-driven vanity films. It was sloppy, yes, but also intensely passionate. The repercussions of the film ran throughout Yoakam's career. The economic pressure caused him to refinance his music company and contributed, indirectly, to the dissolution of his long-standing collaboration with guitarist and producer Pete Anderson. Though South of Heaven, West of Hell fumbled creatively and commercially, it is a critical page in Yoakam's book, a testament that visionaries themselves are willing to risk everything for an opportunity at something new. For good or ill, the film is a testament to his creative bravery. In hindsight, it's less about whether the movie succeeded and more about what it revealed. A creator unwilling to coast, even when the cost was painfully high. After the dust settled, Yoakam found a new way to tell stories, without calling all the shots. Hollywood Cowboy. Dwight Yoakam's transition into acting wasn't a calculated career pivot. It was a natural extension of the same storytelling impulse that powered his music. His breakout performance came in 1996's Sling Blade, where he played Doyle Hargraves, an abusive and emotionally volatile character. The role shocked audiences who knew Yoakam only as a smooth-voiced country singer. His portrayal was chilling in its realism, capturing a kind of restrained rage and emotional chaos that felt disturbingly human. Critics, and viewers alike were stunned, and the performance earned him and the ensemble cast a Screen Actors Guild nomination. More than just a role, Sling Blade was Yoakam's declaration that he was as compelling a presence on screen as he was behind a microphone. Following the success of Sling Blade, Yoakam continued to gravitate toward roles that defied expectations. In David Fincher's 2002 thriller Panic Room, he played Raoul, a masked, twitchy home invader with a menacing unpredictability. The casting was intentional. Fincher chose Yoakam because he wanted to challenge audience assumptions and cast someone unexpected in a villainous role. Yoakam delivered a performance that was quietly unnerving, and his character became a key source of the film's suspense. His ability to disappear into these dark, complex characters stood in stark contrast to his rhinestone-studded stage persona, revealing a depth that few musicians-turned-actors ever achieve. Yoakam offered quick diversification across genres and formats. In Wedding Crashers, 2005, he played the gruff, overbearing father of the bride in a cameo that was short but unforgettable, a decisive exhibition of dry comedy and impeccable timing. He played a sheriff whose moral compromises come into play, thereby asserting his greater ease with ambiguous, emotionally gray roles. On TV, he hit the recurring cast list in Under the Dome and in Amazon's Goliath, where he teamed up again with Billy Bob Thornton. The roles were mostly supporting, but never forgettable. They added to his growing reputation as a serious, committed actor with an edge of his own. All through it, Yoakam remains firmly anchored in the emotional honesty of his music. He believes that his performances, be it a honky-tonk ballad or a powerful dramatic scene, are naked and real, with a sense of truth that comes only from experience. He does not play caricatures, but people with contradictions, pain, and purpose. The sense of authenticity that runs through his work has allowed him to escape the definition of musician-turned-actor and become a genuine storyteller in both art forms. For Dwight Yoakam, it's about not getting another career under the belt, but figuring out other ways to connect with an audience, one role at a time, with the same grit and grace that turned him into a country music legend, taking on Warner Music. In 2021, Dwight Yoakam took a stand not just for himself, but for all artists seeking to reclaim control over their creative work. His legal battle with Warner Music Group centered on the rights to his early recordings, specifically his landmark 1986 debut album, Guitars, Cadillacs, etc., etc. Under the U.S. Copyright Act, artists are allowed to regain ownership of their music after 35 years by filing proper termination notices. Yoakam had done exactly that in 2019, but Warner pushed back, challenging the timing and validity of his filings. What followed wasn't just a dispute over paperwork, it was a high-stakes confrontation over legacy, authorship, and artist autonomy. The lawsuit, filed in the U.S. District Court for the Central District of California, highlighted the growing tension between legacy artists and the corporate entities that control their catalogs. Warner claimed Yoakam's notices were procedurally flawed, while Yoakam's legal team asserted his rights were being ignored in violation of federal law. At stake wasn't just income from royalties. It was the ability to decide how his music would be preserved, distributed, and shared with future generations. In the streaming era, control over master recordings has become more important than ever, and Yoakam's refusal to let his catalog be mishandled made his case a critical moment in the broader fight for artist rights. The legal fight never made it to court, because the parties settled in February 2022 via a confidential out-of-court settlement. The terms of the settlement were never made public, but one can imagine that the result amounted to a big victory for Yoakam. His early albums, which could not be accessed through streaming during the conflict, were quietly returned to digital services, an indication that he had somehow regained at least partial control over the music that defined his rise. For fans, this meant once again being able to access this important piece of country music history. For Yoakam, it was a hard-won affirmation that this work was his and his alone. Yoakam's lawsuit is part of a larger initiative by aging musicians to retrieve property in an industry that has typically favored major labels. After Prince, Taylor Swift, Bob Dylan, and others, Yoakam challenged the outdated norms that widely disempowered creators regarding their value. A fight with Warner was less about pursuing big business strategies than about defending creative sovereignty. It was a reminder that songs that shape culture ought not to be ensconced inside corporate vaults, but instead should live alongside the artists who gave them life. The suit wasn't just another offshoot for Yoakam. It was rather an extension of the same struggle for independence that has typified his entire career. Dwight's triumphant return to the studio. After nearly a decade without releasing a full album of original material, Dwight Yoakam made a resounding return in 2024 with Brighter Days. The album was more than a comeback. It was a reaffirmation of his artistic vitality. At 68, Yoakam proved he had no interest in simply revisiting his past glories. Instead, Brighter Days fused his classic Bakersfield aesthetic with a refreshed emotional clarity, shaped in part by his personal journey as a husband and father. With 12 new songs and 2 unexpected covers, the Carter family's Keep on the Sunny Side and Cake's Bound Away, the record offered a compelling blend of old-school values and new world insight. It was his first release since 2016's Swimmin' Pools, Movie Stars, and was widely praised for both its craftsmanship and its candor. A standout aspect of the album is its emotional intimacy, particularly on the title track, Brighter Days, which Yoakam co-wrote with his 4-year-old son, Dalton. Born out of a spontaneous jam session at home, the song carries a sense of innocence and hope rarely found in modern country. This father-son collaboration became a symbolic centerpiece of the album, not because of novelty, but because it underscored a new phase in Yoakam's songwriting. The lyrics across the album reflect a more personal, grounded perspective, speaking to themes of aging, resilience, and familial love, without losing the sharp storytelling edge that has always been central to his work. One of the most eye-catching features of Brighter Days is the collaboration between Yoakam and Post Malone, a renowned artist in many genres. The duet, I Don't Know How to Say Goodbye, Bang Bang Boom Boom, came along with a cool video filmed on the Sunset Strip featuring actors Malin Ackerman and Nina Dobrev. This single was mind-boggling for several people because of the stylish combination of honky-tonk with a new pop-style production, which indicated that Yoakam could broaden his reach without becoming inauthentic. Rather than appear on another person's guest list, Yoakam took the lead by introducing Malone into his space, a fine testament to the power and adaptability of his musical voice. Critics from outlets like Billboard and the Los Angeles Times praised the album for its breadth and robustness. His whole record was far removed from nostalgia and very urgent in sounding present. Where country is often straddling the fine line of trend following and tradition, Brighter Days has made being rooted and not feeling shackled to exploring something apart, becoming clash. It's a reminder that the art of Dwight Yoakam isn't set back into a time. It's alive, evolving, and indeed is still a strong force within the genre. Dwight's influence on the new generation. Once seen as the outsider who refused to play by Nashville's rules, Dwight Yoakam has, in recent years, stepped into an entirely different role, one of a mentor and cultural steward. While he's still fiercely independent, Yoakam has also embraced a leadership position within the country music world, helping shape the next generation of artists by passing down the very values that once made him a rebel: artistic integrity, respect for heritage, and a fearless approach to self-expression. His evolution from lone renegade to guiding light reflects a full-circle moment in a career built on defying expectations. And his mentorship today is grounded in the hard-won wisdom of decades in the business. One of the most notable examples of this mentorship is his collaboration with rising country singer Annie Bosco. In an RFD TV feature, Bosco credited Yoakam not only for his generosity and collaborative spirit, but for treating her as an equal in a genre often dominated by established voices. Their song Heartburn showcases Yoakam's willingness to lend his talents to artists still climbing the ladder, not out of obligation, but because he believes in fostering the future of the genre. This kind of cosign from a legend isn't just a career boost. It's a powerful statement about inclusion, tradition, and trust in the next wave of storytellers. Aside from personal collaborations, Yoakam's role as a tastemaker has grown through his Sirius XM station, Dwight Yoakam, and the Bakersfield Beat. Greater Bakersfield, his program, is not simply an homage to the twangy electric music that started his career, but a platform for the identification and promotion of new artists who pay respect to the past without succumbing to it. Through a selection of songs, stories, and interviews with newcomers and old-timers both, Yoakam purposely fosters an intergenerational musical conversation. He doesn't merely continue the Bakersfield tradition, he refreshes it, puts it in context, and brings it within reach of listeners who might otherwise overlook its depth. This mentorship position also holds emotional heft when taking into account Yoakam's own humble beginnings. Spurned by Nashville in the 1970s, he constructed a fan base from nothing, wagering on sheer talent and passion. Now, years later, he speaks up for those traveling the same journey. Instead of gatekeeping, he empowers. By providing his platform, voice, and wattage to younger musicians, Yoakam reiterates a faith that country music is strongest when it's personal, raw, and courageous. His path from outside insurgent to grizzled elder statesman isn't merely a comeback story. It's a blueprint for how longevity and legacy are established, not only by remaining oneself, but by assisting others in doing so. Even after passing the torch, Dwight had one more surprise up his sleeve: legacy in motion. At 68, Dwight Yoakam remains one of country music's most enduring and influential figures, not just for what he's done, but for how he continues to evolve. His 2024 album, Brighter Days, stands as a vibrant reminder that legacy isn't about dwelling on the past, but engaging with the present and embracing growth. Drawing deeply from his life as a husband and father, the album infuses Yoakam's signature Bakersfield twang with emotional nuance and lyrical maturity. Tracks like Brighter Days and I'll Be Around reflect on aging, resilience, and family with a clarity that feels lived in rather than manufactured. A standout moment comes with the title track, co-written with his 4-year-old son, Dalton, a tender collaboration that reveals a new layer of introspection. The album also bridges generations with a bold duet alongside Post Malone on I Don't Know How to Say Goodbye, Bang Bang Boom Boom, blending classic country themes with modern pop stylings and cinematic flair in a Sunset Strip set video. Brighter Days has been lauded by critics for both musical and emotional depth. Publications such as Billboard and the LA Times praised its genre-bending sound and raw storytelling. What makes the album work isn't simply Yoakam's technical skill, it's his refusal to glide. He's always deeply invested in the creative process, building a catalog that evolves with the times, but remains rooted in honesty. Outside the studio, Yoakam keeps shaping the genre on his Sirius XM channel, Dwight Yoakam and the Bakersfield Beat, and its featured show, Greater Bakersfield, where he celebrates deep cuts, country icons, and up-and-coming voices. It's not just a tribute, it's an active archive that revives the essence of honky-tonk and rockabilly for new listeners. For Yoakam, the ride has not stopped. It's merely reached a new, more expansive phase. His legacy is not fixed. It moves, propelled by curiosity, integrity, and an eternal passion for the craft. Thanks for watching this deep dive into the legacy of Dwight Yoakam. If you enjoyed the ride, go ahead and hit that like button, drop a comment with your favorite Dwight moment, and subscribe so you never miss stories like this. There's plenty more music history coming your way. So click the next video on your screen and keep exploring the legends behind the lyrics.